What's going on, growers? It's James Pigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Today, I'm going to show you my clever way of trellising tomatoes that reduces effort, minimizes disease, and boosts fruit yields. Let's go! Many years ago, when I started my first garden ever, I grew one tomato plant. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I did enough research to learn that it was a good idea to support your tomato plant and let it grow upright rather than letting it sprawl along the ground. So I put a cage around my plant and let it grow. Surprisingly, the plant had some fruit on it, even though I was growing it in all sand in a spot where there was previously an above ground pool. The harvest wasn't impressive. It was relatively small, but it was enough to encourage me to keep growing, to stick with it, and then to try my hand at growing tomatoes again the next year. After doing some research over the winter, I felt more equipped and decided to switch up my style of growing tomatoes. I went with a new technique that I learned called the pruned staked method. Essentially what you do is you grab a stake. I chose bamboo because I could get it locally. You push that into the ground. Then you plant your tomato right next to the stake. As the tomato grows, you prune it to one single stem and tie it to the stake and just let it keep growing. This method worked very well for me, and I still use this style today to grow some of my tomatoes. An awesome thing about it is it's a great way to fill an open gap in the garden. All you have to do is grab your stake, stick it in the ground, plant a tomato next to it, and it doesn't take up a lot of space because you're growing the tomato vertically. The stake gives it a lot of support, the plants get a lot of light, and the production is prolific. I have grown hundreds of tomatoes in this style. Although I was getting a large amount of success growing tomatoes up stakes, there was one caveat. The plants were getting so dang big, it was tough for me to manage them or even grab a harvest from them. I was growing indeterminate tomatoes, which means these tomatoes will continue to grow and produce fruit up until a frost kills them. Which is nice because that means I can continually go out there and grab fruit from them. The only problem was, as the plants continually grew, they got taller and taller to the point where they looked like trees. They almost felt like trees. I even made a video about how I grow tomato trees in my backyard garden, which was a fun one to do. But when it came down to it, it was actually inconvenient because in order to get up there and prune or harvest tomatoes, I had to get up on a ladder, and that wasn't ideal. I was thinking there's gotta be a better way. Then, maybe 5 years ago, I decided to take a step back and reassess how I was growing. At this time, I became obsessed with the idea of getting as much production as possible and pushing the limits on production, and was aiming to get as much food as I can out of my small amount of space. After doing a deep dive on tomatoes, I came to the surface with a new method that I knew would solve all my problems and more. All I had to do was design and build a trellis that would support my new style of growing. The thing is, I wanted to build a trellis on the cheap and make it something that everyone could afford to build. I was like, I think I could build this whole trellis out of one piece of wood. So that's what I did. I grabbed a 2x8 at a 10-foot length and ripped it into 3 separate pieces. 2 of the pieces would form the 2 legs of my trellis, and the other piece would form the top. I connected them together, and that was my frame. The structure isn't necessarily the important part. It's more about creating something overhead that we can attach a particular tool to, which I'll share with you in just a little bit. Because my new way of growing tomatoes, I'm not growing them up a stake anymore. Instead, I'm growing them up a string. To try out my new style of growing, I decided to build this 1 foot by 10 foot raised bed to plant tomatoes into. I wanted to push the limits and grow 10 tomato plants in 10 square feet, allowing each plant 1 square foot. If you let your tomatoes sprawl along the ground, they'll take up at least 4 square feet. But when you grow them like this vertically, you're saving so much space. So you could plant 4 tomatoes growing vertically in the same amount of space you could plant 1 sprawling, simply because you're growing your tomatoes up instead of allowing them to grow out. The trellis came out better than I was expecting, and I was excited to see if my new way of growing would work out as well as I hoped it would. Stick around for the end of the video because we're going to be announcing the winner of our latest giveaway, which is this right here. a self-watering Vego raised bed with the cover, fully kitted. This is all you guys need to ensure yourself a consistent production. We'll be announcing the winner just at the end of the video. Here's what I did. I started my tomatoes inside in the large Vego seed cells, then transplanted them to a larger pot. Next, I brought them outside and let them harden off before transplanting them into the garden. I took some of my homemade soil and mixed it into the section I will be transplanting my tomato into to add some organic matter. Then I dug my hole, added in some of my JP Secret Stuff all-purpose fertilizer, and mixed that in. I grabbed some bone meal, added that to the hole, and mixed it in as well. Next, I got my plant, which was looking nice and healthy, popped it out of the red solo cup, sprinkled some mycorrhizal inoculant on it, and transplanted it in. I also added a bit more fertilizer on top and mixed that into the top few inches of the soil. And finally, I watered the plant in. I did the same thing with the other 9 tomato plants, spacing them 1 foot apart. After they were planted, I was happy with the way everything looked, and I was also hopeful to see if my new style of growing tomatoes was going to be a success or not. After about a week or two, the plants were looking super healthy and happy, making me hopeful that a big harvest was on the way. 9 days later, the plants had doubled in size, as you can see right here. A week after that, the plants doubled in size again, and they still looked beautiful. 6 days later, the plants were growing well, but it was time for me to come out and do a bit of maintenance to clean them up. The bottom of the plants were getting bushy and blocking some airflow, so I went by and pruned out the lower leaves. This is a good idea because it also helps prevent any diseases that could start at the lower leaves of your plants from moving up and spreading throughout your plant. One thing to note, it's a good idea to clean your pruners with some isopropyl alcohol when you go from one plant to the next. This way you're not just spreading diseases throughout all your plants. Here's what the plants look like after pruning. You can see this will allow for a lot more airflow, and we didn't remove any fruiting clusters or anything. All we removed was the lower sun leaves below the first set of fruit. The plants were starting to flower and set small fruits, and I knew this would be a good time to give them a boost as they head into production. I grabbed my all-purpose fertilizer and sprinkled it around my plants, mixed it in the top few inches of the soil, and watered it in. I did this same thing with my whole line of plants, adding my fertilizer, mixing it in, and watering it in till I was finished. I went by and did this for all my plants. Tomatoes are heavy feeders and need a top dressing mid-season if you want high production. These are indeterminate plants, so if we want them to keep feeding us all season long, we have to stay on top of feeding them. After top dressing, I took some wood chips. You can see they're nicely cut up ones. And I went by and added a few inches of wood chip mulch around my plants to help retain moisture and keep the soil cool. When I finished pruning, top dressing, watering, and mulching, the plants looked good, and it was time for them to kick into high gear. 9 days later, the plants were looking great. They were getting taller and they looked healthy. Also, the first fruit sets were starting to swell up. Some cherry varieties and also some larger varieties. 2 weeks after that, all the plants were loaded with fruit. It was only a matter of time until they would start to ripen. 24 days later, the plants were loaded with ripe tomatoes. All different sizes, colors, shapes. Some of the sets absolutely blew me away. And it was cool looking down the alley of the 2 trellises I built. To me, it was like a hallway to tomato heaven. On this day, I began going out and harvesting some tomatoes, like the Amai tomato, the one you see right here. Nice color to it. The red torch with nice streaking on them. Some purple bumblebee tomatoes, a really cool heirloom variety. Some mountain magic ones, one of my favorite overall tomatoes to grow, so disease resistant. The sun gold cherry, my favorite flavored tomato, and a host of others. I want to take a second to talk about the new trellis system that I was using and the 2 simple, cheap tools that got me excited about this way of growing and that solved all the problems I was having when growing up stakes. First off, one of the big changes in this trellis is that I was now growing my tomatoes up a string instead of a stake, which was nice because, to be honest, it was getting hard for me to find 12-foot bamboo stakes, and my tomatoes were getting so tall, I needed them at that height. Instead of just tying a string to the top of my trellis, I found a really cool tool known as a roller hook. They have a UV-resistant polypropylene twine that won't just snap as the season goes on. The really cool and amazing things about these hooks though is that it allows me to make sure that my tomatoes are always at a manageable height. Let me show you in this clip right here. We'll keep moving our way up and how beautiful the color is. This is the red torch tomato. When it starts to get super tall to the point where it's growing above the trellis, I can take this right here, this roller hook, pull it like that, and then drop the tomato down. This is known as lowering and leaning. Because tomatoes are vines, they take to this really well. What this does is allows the plant to drop down, and I can easily manage the fruit and get to it. And it's like growing a 10 or 12-foot tomato plant with only about 6 or 7 feet of height. And then if you go down, you'll notice that this doesn't really bother the tomato. The tomato just ends up leaning, and it can take this. And over time, the fruit's just gonna be up here. And it's gonna be much easier to manage, much easier to grab, much easier to work on this plant when it's at head height. And here's another example later in the season when the plants are covered with fruit. Look at this Super Sweet 100. Look how loaded with fruit it is. Absolutely beautiful. And look at all the fruit on the trellis right here, this tomato trellis. So incredibly productive. You'll notice this plant, it's starting to get tall and has reached the top of the trellis. This is why I love the lowering and leaning method so much. All we do is push this in right here. It'll drop our tomato down. We could drop it even down too, like that. Now the tomato is lowering and leaning like this. Gives us more space up top and allows the tomatoes to be right within a hand's reach right here. Instead of reaching up for our tomatoes or tying them, we could just grab a clip and attach it right to our tomato plant right up here. It makes the whole process of growing tomatoes so much easier and allows us to get more out of our space and makes it so we don't have to climb up a ladder in order to allow this tomato to keep growing vertically. We're getting all that extra space by lowering and leaning. The other tool that made all the difference is these tomato clips. They're so convenient and easy to use. We just take these clips and push the backside into the string, then put them around the stem of the tomato plant and clip it closed. Using the clips is easy and efficient and makes tying and pruning tomatoes simple, quick, and actually fun to do. It saves you a lot of time too, compared to tying your tomatoes with like a string or a cut up shirt or whatever else. As the years have progressed, I've made some adjustments to my trellis and refined a few things. One piece I added just a year or two ago was right here, come down. I added this piece of wood here that I could tie my string to. The reason I did this is when the tomato's growing up the string and the wind blows and it pulls on the tomato plant, it will pull at this piece of wood down here instead of pulling at the base of my tomato plant and kind of yanking at the roots a little bit. So I think just this little adjustment was a big help. But besides that, I'm still using the same system of growing tomatoes today that I started using about 4 or 5 years ago, besides just a few of the little adjustments that I shared with you. With my new method of growing tomatoes, the production has been incredible. I mean, we're talking such a large harvest in such a small amount of space, and it's the system that I kind of always dreamed about, so it feels really good to like bring that into reality. Not to mention, when using the clips, it's so easy to tie your tomatoes to the string. And with the roller hooks, it's easy to lower and lean your tomatoes, and it makes it so nice and convenient to work on the tomatoes, to grab a harvest from them. Not to mention, it's a lot safer because now I don't have to climb up on a ladder. Another thing is, with this style, it actually helps conserve water, I think, because these little beds that I built, they kind of help hold the water and concentrate it. So when I put a hose down and give these plants a deep watering, all the water stays in this small area and then slowly sinks deep into the ground. And that's the exact kind of watering that tomatoes love. I personally believe that this is the most efficient way to grow tomatoes. I can't think of a better way to kind of maximize our space and maximize production while also making it easy to work on. Let me know down in the comments if you guys have any alterations or any different styles of growing tomatoes that you think I should try out. I still do and will grow tomatoes up stakes, especially in little areas like I mentioned earlier that I want to fill a gap. So just say like I have 2 fruit trees and there's a big space between them and I don't have a raised bed or something, I'll just stick a stake in, stick a tomato, grow it right up it. So I still think that's a great method and I still use it. Also, if you guys have never tried pruning your tomato plants, I suggest you do in the future. I'll be going into a detailed video of that shortly in about a week or 2 as my tomatoes start to get into the ground, grow a little bit, and then need their first pruning. So make sure you hit the subscribe button if that's something you're interested in seeing, because I will go into extreme detail on exactly how I prune my tomato plants. Yes, I prune them to a single stem, but I've also developed some advanced methods where it's kind of like a hybrid of pruning and not pruning, which allows me to get a high production while still saving space. I told you guys earlier that we were going to announce the giveaway, so let's get into that now. We like to do a lot of giveaways, and if you guys want to be a part of them, maybe you didn't win this one, but all you have to do is go to teamgrow.us. Most of the time we have a giveaway going because we love giving things away to the community. You guys are coming to the site, you're part of the community, and you guys, I mean, we want to give back to you because you're giving to us, so it's only right that we reciprocate that a little bit. So let's do the announcement for the self-watering Vego raised bed, fully kitted with the cover. You guys had to guess a number between 1 and 1,000. What I did was I went to Google, I typed in random number generator, I put it between 1 and 1,000. It kicked me out the number 683. I looked through all submissions and it appears as though, drumroll please, Tony McManus is the winner. Congratulations, Tony, on your self-watering raised bed. We're gonna email you, get back to us as quick as you can so that we can send that bed out to you and you could start using it this year and get it planted and grow some delicious food in it. If everyone could just congratulate Tony down in the comments, I know he would appreciate that and we would appreciate it too. Then also let us know down in the comments, what do you want us to give away next? What do you think would give you guys the highest amount of value? And maybe there's one of you who don't have the funds at the moment to be able to buy some of this stuff, but you can maybe get it in a giveaway. That's one of the reasons we love doing the giveaways. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you got something out of it. I hope I kind of gave you some different ideas on how to trellis your tomatoes. No, you don't have to make the exact same trellis that I set up, but if you do try this method and this style of growing tomatoes, I think it will bring you a lot of value. I think you'll get very high production. I think you'll be very happy with how easy it is to do. And also let me know in the comments how many of you have tried using the tomato clips. These clips are something that I've shared maybe a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even 6 years ago at this point. I think I was one of the first people on YouTube and gardening to be sharing these clips when growing tomatoes, how convenient they are and how easy it is to use. So if you have tried them, let me know down in the comments. Let me know what you think. One of the complaints that I have and I often get is that the clips can kind of get brittle at the end of the year and then end up cracking and it only lasts for a season. I found that too, but they're so cheap that I think it's worth it to just get new clips every year. On some of the other sites, they have more expensive clips where they're a few dollars more and they last longer, but it costs a lot more. So if you want to get the longer lasting ones, that's something you can do. I also wanted to send a thank you to one of our new channel members, Michelle Deal. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. Thanks for having your hand in everything we're doing out here. The garden has greened up so much. It seems like every few days the plants are doubling in size, and soon we'll bring you along for a full tour to let you know how everything's growing, some things we're hopeful for this year, and then some other cool ideas and cool ways where you guys can guarantee yourself bigger harvests in the future. I had a blast out here. We'll catch you guys in another one real soon. We out.